Hello guys, we are back with a new fanfic. Which is what if Naruto became the forbidden lover of the Raikage's daughter, part 2. If enjoy this fanfic please like and. Kakashi awoke with a jolt. It was about 4 a.m. His internal alarm clock was blaring, waking him in time for, what did he need to do today? Oh. The Hatake groaned and debated rolling over and falling back to sleep, but a warm weight on his chest made him freeze. Looking down, he saw Naruto and Pakun tangled together, fast asleep. A glance around reminded him that he was in the living room, lying on the couch. His hand, dangling off the edge of the couch towards the floor, was resting on the cover of the book Naruto, which was open. Jiraiya was snoring in the armchair nearby. Sighing, Kakashi tapped Pakun until he woke up and said very quietly, "Hey, you can go. I won't need you today. Thanks for hanging around." Pakun yawned widely, showing his fangs, and nodded sleepily. "See ya, Kakashi," he slurred, disappearing with a pop. Stifling a yawn of his own, Kakashi looped his arms around Naruto and lifted him, cradling the soft body close as he sat up before gently laying him back on the couch and draping the blanket that was hung over the lamp. How'd that get there? Over his son to keep him warm. Within 15 minutes, he'd toileted, shaved, dressed and returned to the living room ready for the day. Walking quietly past the sleeping parties in the room, he made his way to the kitchen. Once there, he quickly stacked 3 pre-made bento boxes, and dug in the fridge for some food for himself. He ate quickly over the sink, ignoring the taste of the 3-day-old cold noodles, and tossed the empty container into the sink once he was done. Next, he pulled together a few sandwiches for Naruto's own breakfast and wrapped them in brown paper, stowing them in a pocket in his Junin vest. He was still in shock, really. He couldn't believe the Hokage was making him do this. His mind absently wandered back 3 days. It was with some measure of trepidation that Kakashi answered the summons to the Hokage's office. "Ah, Kakashi." Sarutobi smiled at him as he walked in. Come in, come in. How have you been?" Kakashi took a few steps further into the room. "I left Naruto at the park with Sume to watch over him, sir," he said pointedly. Thankfully, Sarutobi got the message. "To business, then," he said. "I would like for you to take a genin team this year." Kakashi was sure he'd misheard. "That's funny," he said. "Really? I'm not joking. I have assigned you Squad 11. They graduate the day after tomorrow." The Hokage's face was serious. Kakashi took a step backwards. "But, what do I do with Naruto?" he asked, feeling lost. Sarutobi raised an eyebrow. "I'm sure you'll figure out something," he remarked. "But sir, I'm not the teaching type." Kakashi protested. "Not a negotiation," Sarutobi said pleasantly. "Be at the academy, day after tomorrow, to meet your team. Don't be late, now." "Funny," Kakashi muttered, ignoring the sting as the words reminded him of a certain always late Uchiha. So what if Kakashi had been a little late to some things recently? It was hard to keep to schedule when you have a toddler in the house. What the hell was he in for? 3 days later, Kakashi repeated the mental query to himself. What the hell was he in for? He'd met the brats yesterday, and compared to them, Naruto in a tantrum was a downright angel. He'd actually had to grab the girl before she was shoved off the edge of the roof by the 2 boys wrestling. Quickly stuffing a few things into his backpack, he filled Naruto's sippy cup with cold orange juice and moved out to the living room once again. Unceremoniously, he kicked Jiraiya hard in the shins, and the older man jerked awake with a strangled shout. "What the hell, brat?" he hissed, squinting at Kakashi. Kakashi smiled innocently. "I have an early appointment. You have to leave," he informed the Sannin. Jiraiya's eyes lit up. "I could watch Naruto for a bit, if you're busy," he offered hopefully. "Not a chance," Kakashi said flatly. Out. By the time he'd kicked a stumbling and swearing Jiraiya out of his house, it was 5 a.m. Kakashi took a deep breath, knowing that he was supposed to be meeting his genin right now. "Ah, well, Naruto," he said gently, kneeling next to the couch and rubbing the boy's back. Time to get up, pup. Let's go. You and I are going to test a trio of imbeciles. Naruto moaned a little and tried to curl tighter into a ball. Kakashi chuckled and carefully lifted him. Come on, let's get you dressed. Half an hour later, Naruto was dressed and sleeping on Kakashi's shoulder while he stalked towards a group of tired, impatient children. You're late, sensei, accused one of the guys. What was his name? Kakashi really didn't care. From now on, he could be whiner. Sorry about that, Kakashi said, his tone suggesting the opposite. I got a little held up. Someone didn't want to wake up. He felt Naruto slipping and hoisted him higher on his hip. The other guy spoke up. Hey, what's that? Okay. He could be moron. This is a child. You may have seen one before. Konoha has quite an infestation of them. Kakashi's tone was light but dripped with dark sarcasm that screamed you're going down. The kids didn't seem to get it. Okay, but why is it here? The girl asked haughtily. Now, what to call her? Impudent brat who was questioning her superiors. Nah, that was too long. Just, brat, would do. First of all, he growled with some bite and enough killer intent to make the trio cringe. If any of you ever calls my son it, again, I'll feed your innards to my dogs and laugh as you scream. I don't care if you're bloody genin wannabes, no one screws with my family. There. That seemed to get his point across quite nicely. The children were shivering in their sandals. Whiner looked slightly green, while Brat looked on the verge of saying something dumb. Sure enough, she soon opened her mouth. My brother will, she began hotly, and Kakashi rolled his eyes. I outtrank him, he interrupted. She looked affronted. How do you know? She demanded. Kakashi raised an eyebrow. Does your brother happen to be the Hokage? He asked. She shook her head. Then I outranked him. There was a pause while Kakashi let this sink in, before he let the key disappear suddenly and made an effort to appear more human. Okay, now that that's cleared up, he began, let's do this. You see these bells? He held up the twin silver objects and began rapidly explaining the basics of a typical bell test, such as he himself had been tested with. But, what about the kid? Moron asked when Kakashi gave the order to begin. Kakashi raised a silver eyebrow. Oh, don't worry about Naruto, he said lightly. It won't make any difference. Just pretend he's not here. Naruto, having heard his name, began to shift, rubbing his eyes sleepily. Daddy, he mumbled. MCP. Go home, now. Soon, Naru, soon, Kakashi assured him. I know it's early. You just go back to sleep and let daddy deal with the extras. Are you kids going to attack, or are you planning on just standing there staring like codfish? Not unexpectedly, it was Moron who attacked first, with a head-on charge typical of the race of the Moron, and Kakashi rolled his eyes before dodging it with grace, Naruto barely noticing the movement as he buried his face in his father's shoulder and nodded off again. Whiner was the next to attack, lobbing a series of sharp objects at the Junin. Again, Kakashi simply sidestepped, right into Brat, who was waiting with a glinting silver sword. The adult was pleased to see her holding it reasonably well, but when she attacked him, it was with an obvious, clumsy stroke that he could easily block with a kunai he grabbed from his pouch. Unfortunately, the movement required to pull out the weapon jostled Naruto into wakefulness rather abruptly. In an instant, the blonde screwed his face up and began to cry, signaling his displeasure in a typical tired toddler fashion. Oh, Naruto, Kakashi said, shoving Brat away with enough force to send her flying backwards. Did I wake you up? I'm sorry, pup. Do you want some juice? Juice. Naruto repeated hopefully, looking up from his tears. Kakashi handed him his brightly colored sippy cup, and Naruto took it eagerly. Kakashi lowered him to sit cross-legged on the grassy ground and patted his back, saying, You just stay put while I scatter some pansies, okay? The little gold head bobbed agreeably, totally fixated on his orange juice. Kakashi stepped easily over his head, pulling out another kunai almost lazily and smirking as the two boys took an apprehensive step backwards. He allowed the smirk to spread throughout his entire body, showing it to the kids, and waited a moment to give Naruto a chance to wake up, in case he wanted to watch. Then he moved. 10 seconds, 4 strikes in a mud bath later, all three would-be genin were running for their lives. Returning to his son, Kakashi observed Naruto's laughter and mused that the kid would go far in this business. Hey, kid, he said, hunkering down next to the short blonde child. Hungry. I have sandwiches. As Naruto somehow shoved an entire, whole sandwich into his mouth at once, Kakashi absently listened for the genin while trying to stop his son from giving himself indigestion. Moron's there, brat is, under that bush, and whiner is, up that tree. Mental note, his stealth is better than the others. They all seemed to be opting for observation for the time being, and Kakashi decided that they weren't an immediate threat. So, moving on. Naruto, today I'm going to teach you about something called tactics, he said. What better place to teach the kid this than here, with a great many examples of what not to do all around him. Naruto looked up, blue eyes squinting because of how much food was in his mouth, making his cheeks bulge. Runk, he managed, giving Kakashi a truly nauseating view of an entire half-chewed sandwich. Naruto, swallow, then talk, he sighed. Don't talk when there is food in your mouth, remember? Because it's rude, it's gross and daddy can't understand you anyway. Naruto nodded and swallowed with difficulty, then tried again. Tactics? He asked. Kakashi nodded. Tactics, he repeated, but didn't stress it further. A tactic is, well, similar to a plan. It's how you approach something. Naruto his head, confused, and Kakashi reached into his backpack, pulling out Naruto's wooden blocks. He spread them out on the grass before Naruto. Okay, he said, rapidly stacking 4 of them, one on top of the other to create a small tower. Say it was your mission to knock this tower over. What would you do? Naruto his head adorably. Hi, he suggested. Kakashi nodded. Yes, hitting it is a good idea. But where would you hit it, remembering you want to make all the blocks fall over? Where would make all the blocks fall? He watched as Naruto considered, turning back to the tower to examine it. Eventually, he came up with his answer and said firmly, Boamun. The bottom one. So, your plan, Kakashi stressed, is to hit the bottom block, and so make all of them fall over. Naruto nodded, and he ruffled his hair. Good work. Yes, that's a good plan. That is an example of a tactic, see? For a second the Junin thought Moron was going to make a move, but the next instant the hint of movement died, and he refocused on Naruto. What if you wanted to knock the tower over, but you couldn't hit the bottom one? There's something blocking the bottom one so you can't touch it. Naruto looked over the tower again, taking a little longer this time. Kakashi hoped the exercise wasn't confusing him, but eventually the little head nodded firmly as the child sat back on his bottom again. Hi. He said, pointing at the block second from the bottom. Kakashi nodded, half kneeling next to him. Very good. Now, what if? He stopped as a twig snapped loudly and someone swore about, 10 feet behind him and rolled his eyes. Moron was on the move, and would have continued if not for the way Naruto's eyes snapped to Moron, absolutely livid, and snatched up one of the unused blocks in his right hand. Shut up. Trina Leon, he screamed, throwing the block as hard as his little limb could hurl it. Kakashi blinked when he heard a thunk crack and a howl of pain as it hit, followed by a thump as Moron tumbled to the ground. He held himself perfectly still, staring at the now smug expression on Naruto's baby face. I'm not going to turn around, he said slowly and loudly enough for Moron to hear him, because if I do, I'm going to see a wannabe genin who has been downed by a 3-year-old. That kid has one hell of an arm on him, Moron grumbled, clothing rustling noisily as he sat up. OWW, Kakashi was mildly surprised. Oh, you're still awake then. Not one of your best throws, Naruto. Naruto scowled, first at the genin, then at his father and finally at the blocks on the grass in front of him. Hi, I am WIV da side, stead of da corner. You have to learn to compensate for that, remember? His father reminded him. Naruto's surly look didn't vanish. Stupid Bak. Kakashi smiled, not that it could be seen through his mask, and continued, so, Naruto, I have a challenge for you. Say there's a wall around the tower. How do you get to the bottom block to knock it all over? He stood up, dusting off his knees. And on that note, there's a genin or two who have little enough stealth for me to stop ignoring them. Instantly he turned in time to fend off an attack from both Moron and Whiner, each coming from different sides. Without preamble, he cracked their heads together and they dropped like stones. You're going to have to try something different if you want to stand even a snowball's chance in hell of getting these bells, he informed their unconscious bodies. Daddy, I has idea, Naruto said suddenly, and he turned back to the boy. F ya climb da wa, why-cowed no, over da boam bak. Or, you cowed just no, over da wa too, f it's only, s big, s da tower. Kakashi laughed, and nodded. Yes, that's right, he agreed. Well done, you're getting the hang of this. Hang on, I have a couple of idiots to drop in the river. Saying so, he bent and lifted the weakly struggling boys he'd bashed together and ambled happily over to the nearby river, where he proceeded to toss them into the icy water. I do hope you can swim. Next time, try something new. How's this? Brad asked darkly from Naruto's direction. Kakashi spun around in time to see her fly at his son, kunai out, ready to slash at the toddler, and a second later he was there, grabbing and twisting her wrists, throwing her away, slamming her against a tree trunk and leaning close to speak in her ear. Didn't I already warn you? He said darkly, what happens to people who attack my son? Sitting among his blocks, Naruto grinned. This was going to be interesting. That evening, Kakashi was humming to himself as he cut carrots to cook for dinner. A thump made him pause, and he leaned back a little so he could peer into the living room, where he'd placed Naruto in a playpen while he made dinner. The playpen was empty, its wooden gate open, a wooden mock kunai abandoned next to the wooden bars. Kakashi sighed. He didn't know why he even bothered. Putting down his knife, he wiped his hands on his pants as he made his way through the house, searching out the young boy. Great ninja skills be damned, Kakashi stumbled a little as he stepped on something that gave under his weight. Looking down, he saw Oink, Naruto's favorite toy. He bent down and picked it up, frowning a little, and placed it carefully out of harm's way on the couch before continuing through the house. When he reached the hallway, a yellow flicker above him caught his attention. Aha! Naruto was on the second floor landing. Kakashi paused in the corner and watched Naruto trot down the upper-level hallway towards the stairs. He felt a pang in his heart when he realized Naruto was holding the frog Jiraiya had given him tucked under his arm, where Oink had resided for the last 2.5 years. He shoved angrily at the emotion. Of course Naruto would choose toads over dogs, it was in his blood. He was not and never would be Kakashi's son, and Kakashi needed to remember that. He couldn't allow himself to forget that fact. Jiraiya had more right to him as the kid's godfather than Kakashi would ever have. So why did his chest hurt? It was startlingly painful to watch Naruto stop at the top of the stairs and lift that orange frog plushie high above his head while Oink had been abandoned carelessly on the floor, but then a feral grin split the boy's face and he threw the toy as hard as he could, throwing so that it flew all the way down the stairs and hit the 1/3 from the bottom with a pitiful squeak. Naruto laughed, and Kakashi watched, stunned, as he carefully, holding onto the rail and moving slowly just like Kakashi had taught him, descended the staircase and grabbed the frog harshly, dragging it back up to the top stair to repeat the whole process. This time he managed to hit the bottom stair, and he laughed delightedly. Kakashi decided to step in and moved into the child's field of view, bending to pick up the toy as Naruto struggled to climb down the stairs as fast as, slow and careful, would allow. I see you're enjoying Gigi's gift, he commented, offering the toy back to the child. Naruto took it and nodded, grinning. Yeah, make fun. Squishy sound. He declared. Kakashi smiled a little. So this is how you play with toys, huh? Interesting. I never noticed you doing this with Oink. Kakashi was taken aback at the disgust that was instantly written over the boy's face. Not fro Oink. He my FWIEND. He half shouted indignantly. No, Ike stupid froggy. Kakashi had to bite back a shout of amusement as he thought of how Jiraiya would respond to that statement. He shook his head at the pouting child. So, what did you name it? He asked, gesturing the toy. Naruto shot him a look that said, are you stupid or something? S.A. Froggy, Daddy, he told him in a no-duh kind of way. Froggy's Dawn has names. Dumb. Kakashi laughed. Pair walked towards the training grounds holding hands, one tall and silver-haired, the other short and blonde. Kakashi listened attentively as the boy told him in great detail about the outing he'd had with his godfather the day before. Kakashi had finally consented to give him 2 hours with the brat, as Jiraiya was leaving the village today and wouldn't be back for goodness knew how long. Even 2 hours seemed to be enough to expose the 4-year-old to some questionable, purely Jiraiya pastimes, and it was just as well Naruto was so innocent. And then, he did the weird dance thing he does and he stood on his hair and felled over. Gigi's an idiot, Naruto said matter-of-factly. Kakashi started and began to cough at the address. Where did you learn that word? He demanded, thinking it was a good thing Jiraiya was well and truly out of the country by now. Naruto blinked at him. The ladies at the hot springs was yelling it at him. Kakashi closed his eye. He was going to regret asking this, but they called him Gigi. No, they called him something else, but I can remember the something else, so now he's Gigi. Naruto nodded firmly. Kakashi said, tugging Naruto out of the way of a jogging genin team. Soon, they'd reached the sunny, grassy training field Kakashi favored when teaching his young companion things. He'd promised Naruto something special today, to reward him for his first day of learning kanji, the more difficult form of writing used in Konoha. It sort of surprised Kakashi how much the young boy seemed to enjoy physical learning, throwing kunai and taijutsu forms and the like, but as he always took pains to make it into a game of sorts, he supposed it wasn't too unusual. Neither of them knew how to play normally, after all. Okay, he said bright, stopping in the center of the training grounds. Today, we're going to do something special. Naruto nodded eagerly. Yeah. You promised. Something cool and awesome, right? Whoa, hold on, Kakashi laughed, grabbing the flailing small fists. Today, I'm going to set you throwing kunai at those targets over there. Instantly, Naruto's face fell. But that's boring, he whined. I know how to do that. You promised something new. Kakashi grinned at the small boy. I did, huh? Well, here I was thinking today I'd teach you how to throw live kunai, but if you'd prefer something different. Naruto's eyes were wide. What's live kunai? He asked. Kakashi reached into his kunai pouch and drew out one of his kunai, the sort he used in real fights, and knelt to put himself on Naruto's level. This is a live kunai, he said, showing it to the child. A little more dangerous than the wooden mock-ups you've been taught with, nay. The odd look on the 4-year-old's face was hysterical as he tentatively reached out a tiny hand to, very carefully, touch the flat metal blade. When his hand came into contact with the cool metal, he jumped and jerked the hand backwards, and his eyes snapping up to Kakashi's. The adult smiled reassuringly, knowing Naruto knew him well enough to read the expression through his mask. Now, you have to listen to me, Naru, he said firmly. The rule that you're not allowed to touch Daddy's kunai is still in place. If I am going to teach you to use live kunai, you have to promise me that you will only ever touch them here, in this training ground, with me here to watch you, until I specifically tell you otherwise. If I find out, and I will, I promise you, that you've been touching these without permission, I will stop teaching you this instantly, and you will have to go back to wooden kunai and shuriken until you are taught this in the academy. Do you understand? Naruto nodded instantly, and Kakashi ruffled his hair with his free hand, satisfied. Okay, then, he said, stowing his kunai back in his pouch and pulling out another kunai pouch from one of his many pockets. This is a weapons pouch I assembled for you. Using it, I will teach you how to use and care for the basic shinobi tools. Inside, you have 5 kunai, 5 shuriken and a roll of ninja wire. He opened the rather dirty pouch to show him, and Naruto's eyes widened even further at the thought that these were his now. Kakashi reached out to grab his wrist before the boy could plunge his hand into the pouch and explore it. Not just yet. Now, these are some of my old things, and they are blunted, but you still have to treat them as if they are battle-worthy, okay? I want to teach you good habits first, before giving you the deadly stuff. Also, you can still hurt yourself badly with kunai that are blunted, so promise me you will be careful, and not touch these without permission. I promise, Daddy, Naruto said earnestly. Kakashi nodded and stood up, brushing grass off his knees absently. Okay. Then let's get this show on the road. First of all, how's about I show you what you can do with these weapons, if you learn to use them correctly? Without waiting for an answer, he placed Naruto's pouch on the ground and casually slipped his hand into his own pouch, drawing out several shuriken and a kunai. With a flick of his wrist, he sent the black star shuriken flying in a deadly arch, then caught the kunai firmly in his palm and spun, releasing it with practiced timing, allowing it to fly through the air, catching all 3 shuriken and pinning them to the dead center of a painted target on one of the posts nearby. After a pause that lasted only a second, the paper bomb wrapped around the handle of the kunai activated and the whole thing blew up. Kakashi smirked. There. Flashy, but simple, and something Naruto should be able to master within a year, if he worked hard enough. Well, minus the paper bomb, Kakashi had just thrown that in for effect. There was no way he was letting a 4-year-old with a prankster gene anywhere near explosives. Good enough to impress and motivate the 4-year-old. Cool. Wow. Ka-boom. You are so amazing, Daddy. Naruto turned big blue eyes on his father, an expression of unadulterated hero worship on his features. Kakashi ruffled his hair again. So, shall we start? He suggested, bending to catch up the starter pouch he'd compiled for the boy. He knelt behind the 3-foot-high bundle of sunshine and put his arms around him, fitting a blunt kunai to his small hand and beginning the long process of teaching him how to use it. Kakashi strode through the streets of Konoha, his left hand holding firmly to Naruto's right, tugging him along whenever he got distracted, slowing him down when he tried to race on ahead. It had been 3 months since he'd first begun teaching Naruto how to use live kunai, and he was reasonably pleased with the boy's progress. He still wouldn't dare let him practice unsupervised, but he'd gotten much better with the metal weapons. He'd even become rather adept at cleaning them and rebinding the handles. Kakashi was currently mulling over the pros and cons of teaching him how to sharpen the weapons too. So far, cons were winning. Kakashi, said Hatake, glanced up and nodded as Inuzuka Sume waved at him, calling him over to her. She was seated on the grass, leaning back against her big dog Koromaru, and she grinned up at him as he approached. Hey, kid, she said. What's up? Not much. We've come to play in the park, Kakashi said dryly, nodding at Naruto, who had pulled his hand free of his father and was cautiously approaching Koromaru. The large animal was watching him with an amused eye. Sume nodded. Yeah, my youngest one is playing here, too, she said, nodding at the playground 15 meters in front of them. And I'm not on duty until tomorrow, so I got time to watch the little monster. Kakashi nodded absently, watching Naruto tentatively place his hand on Koromaru's side, and then very cautiously begin stroking his fur. Koromaru was clearly trying not to laugh. Naruto, the silver-haired Junin said, catching the blonde's attention, you have half an hour here before we need to leave. Why don't you go play? I'll be right here if you need me. The 4-year-old nodded enthusiastically, gave the fascinating, huge, dog one last pat and raced off to the playground, leaving Kakashi to sink onto the ground, pull out a romance novel he'd found in his father's study and begin to read. Naruto loved the park. He loved it. It was so much fun, with seesaws and sandpits and rickety bridges and a big slide that went really fast, but by far, Naruto's favorite was the swing. He'd been trying to convince Daddy that they really needed a swing in their own backyard, but so far, Daddy had been unconvinced. All in all, it was little wonder the blonde made a beeline towards the swing set. Naruto, the youngest Hatake, stopped and turned around, and broke into a grin when he saw a brown-haired, brown-eyed boy with red triangles on his cheeks and a green smear on his grubby t-shirt. His name was Kiba. He was cool. Naruto grinned and broke into a run, racing to join the boy who'd called him. Hey, Kiba, he cheered. The taller boy grinned down at him. Haven't seen you in a while, he commented. Naruto shook his head and grinned sheepishly. Daddy said I couldn't come for a whole week, 'cause I kinda, set the living room on fire. The blonde trailed off, looking shamefaced, but Kiba just laughed. And you only got a week without the park. Man, if I'd done that, my mum tanned my hide so bad. I had early bedtime, too, and an extra hour of maths every day, Naruto moaned. My brain hurts f-arm all the sums. Kiba grinned at him again, showing off unnaturally, but, in Naruto's opinion, totally cool, sharp canine teeth. You wanna play with me? He asked generously. Naruto was a little kid, after all, and it was Kiba's task as a grown-up 6-year-old to be nice. Naruto looked up at the taller boy hopefully. Will you push me on the swings? He asked, blue eyes pleading with the Inuzuka. Kiba rolled his brown eyes, but was distracted almost instantly when he noticed another boy standing off to the side, silently watching the playing, squealing children in the park. Shino. He said, hey, come on, he added to Naruto, and quickly trotted over to the boy he'd noticed, Naruto at his heels. Hey, Shino, he said brightly. The new boy looked at Kiba for a moment, and then nodded his head. Hello, he said quietly, his eyes turning back to look out over the park. Kiba grinned at him, and then at a confused and shy Naruto. This is Shino, he announced. His dad and my mum are friends. He's my age. Shino, this is Naruto. He's just little, but he's okay. I'm not little. Naruto instantly protested at a yell. I'm big too. Kiba scoffed. I'm 6. You're 4. You are little. Naruto scowled. Almost 5, he grumbled. The new boy, Shino, quickly broke up the building argument by simply stepping between them and saying, hello, Naruto, in a soft, calming tone. Instantly, the argument was forgotten in the way only children can manage. We're gonna play ninja, Kiba announced. Wanna play, Shino? Naruto didn't remember agreeing to this, but decided to go along with it anyway. Playing ninja was fun. Not as fun as when he played learning to be a ninja with Daddy, but still good. After a pause, Shino nodded once. That would be acceptable. Within 10 minutes, they were running through the park, desperate to get away from a group of evil enemy missing nin armed with exploding kunai and fireballs and bumblebees. Naruto shouted. The others paused. Why bumblebees? Kiba asked. Naruto crossed his arms and puffed out his cheeks sulkily. Bumblebees is scary, he said stubbornly. Kiba considered. It was a fair point. Bumblebees. He screamed at the top of his lungs, run. Giggling, the three of them ducked under the rickety bridge to hide as a swarm of bumblebees flew overhead. We have to do something quick. Kiba hissed, excitement lighting up his eyes. Or they'll break through the walls and Konoha'll be doomed. I can take care of the bees, offered Shino. Kiba nodded. You wait here, Naruto, he instructed. Too dangerous for someone as little as you. But I'm not little, Naruto protested, dismayed and reluctant to be left behind. I wanna help. Kiba considered. No, idiot. You get to be backup, he declared. But that means you gotta wait here until I calls for you, 'cause you're the hero who comes in last second and surprises the bad guys. Yeah. Satisfied, Naruto nodded and huddled under the bridge as the two older warriors bravely left safety to fight off bees and enemy shinobi. Within 2 minutes tense waiting, Naruto heard Kiba shout for him, and ran out to help. On the way, though, he stumbled and tripped over, sprawling over the grassy ground and bumping into someone sitting on the edge of the sandpit. There was a stunned pause, before the boy he'd bumped turned around, dropping the handful of sand he'd been sifting and glaring. Watch it, he snapped. Naruto pulled himself to his knees and shook his head, his lip trembling when he saw he'd grazed his wrist. Naruto, are you okay? Kiba skidded to a stop next to the fallen child and tried to pull him to his feet. You need to be careful, he scolded. You could get hurt, and then Mum'll be mad at me for not looking after you right. Shino jogged up and was watching silently. What he needs is to look where he's going, the dark-haired boy Naruto had bumped into put in. He crashed right into me, and he hasn't even said sorry. Kiba looked annoyed. Leave him alone, Uchiha. He's just a little kid. He's 4. Glancing at Naruto, he added, this is Uchiha Sasuke. He's in my class at the academy, and he's a total teacher's pet. Gets every answer right. Naruto looked up at the new boy curiously. Hi, he said shyly. Sorry, I tripped, didn't mean to hit you. Sasuke looked mollified at the explanation, and the fact that it was a kid much younger than him 2 whole years, who'd bumped him, and nodded back. Maybe you shouldn't run as fast, he offered, sounding much more, not friendly exactly, but definitely no longer hostile. My Aniki says that it's best to move a little slower and be safe than to rush and be injured. My daddy says, F it won't kill ya, go nuts, Naruto quoted clumsily. Sasuke frowned at him, the idea that anyone could think something different to his wonderful Aniki rather hard to grasp. Naruto. Naruto looked up. Daddy. Kakashi had seen the tumble and had come to investigate. Are you alright? My arm's bleedin', Naruto reported, holding out the limb. Kakashi took it and examined the slight graze. Ouch, he commented, mentally stating that the kid was fine. Here, I'll wash it off for you. Say goodbye to your friends, Naru, we need to go now. Naruto nodded. Bye, he called to the 3 older boys gathered around him. See ya, Kiba said back. Bye, Sasuke added. Shino inclined his head, but he was weird, so it didn't bother the blonde as he was lifted and carried to the water fountain nearby, where Daddy quickly rinsed off his graze and dried it with a handkerchief, fixing a band-aid in place once he was done. Kakashi finished quickly and ruffled Naruto's hair, saying, Daddy needs to do some shopping now, okay? Come on, let's do that quickly, and then we'll go home. And maybe I'll even let us stop off to get some ramen for dinner on the way home. The promise in place, he led Naruto towards the marketplace, smiling at the child's cheer. Weaving through the crowded streets, one hand firmly clasped around Naruto's, Kakashi mused that it was times like this he was truly grateful Sarutobi had chosen him to raise the brat. Naruto was like sunshine incarnate, lighting up his otherwise grim world. He'd never thought having a child would end up being so fun. Realizing exactly what he was thinking, Kakashi gave himself a mental slap, and then a mental kick in the shins for good measure. What am I thinking? He asked himself angrily. This is just temporary. Naruto's not really my son. Don't lose sight of reality, Hatake. Focus. Real parents don't get paid for parenting. He let go of Naruto's hand as if he'd been burnt, and instead muttered keep up, to the kid, navigating his way through the marketplace and pausing at a vegetable stall. Quickly, he made some selections, glancing occasionally at the boy standing patiently, or not so patiently, beside him to make sure he hadn't wandered off. Naruto curled his little fingers into Daddy's pant leg, anchoring himself to the man in an instinctive bid not to lose him, his eyes flitting around the marketplace curiously. It was really interesting, this whole place. There was something going on in every direction, and Naruto amused himself trying to observe everything at once, finally settling on watching a pigeon trying to work up the courage to pick up half a crust of bread from near a busy bread stall. Daddy started to move, a paper bag tucked under his arm, and Naruto allowed himself to be tugged along by his grip on his father's clothing. They stopped again, and Naruto glanced up to see they were at a stall that sold pasta and rice and stuff like that. Bored with the idea, he looked around again and his eyes lit up when he spotted it. An orange balloon, ownerless, dancing along teasingly through the crowds, ignored by everyone as the wind blew it to and fro along the ground. Naruto was hooked. Without a thought, he let go of his father and left his side, weaving through the crowds and never once taking his eyes off the bright orange bubble. He'd almost reached it when firm hands clapped around his ribcage and hoisted him up into the air. Daddy must have caught him. Squirming, Naruto turned to pout at his father, but the expression slid right off as instead of his father's reproving features, he was confronted with the face of a total stranger. With a shriek of surprise and fear, Naruto began struggling in earnest, the hundreds of his father had given him about going with strangers echoing in his mind. The stranger shifted so that he could bring his hands together to make hand seals, quickly flashing through a few and saying a couple of words Naruto didn't understand. Suddenly, the 4-year-old felt exhausted, and his eyes began to fall closed. Just before he drifted off, he sensed the man carrying him stroking his hair, saying, "There now, shish. That was a good deal easier than I expected it to be, little Hatake. You just be a good boy and sleep now." Then, Naruto was forced to give in to the strange drowsiness, and fell asleep. Dai was getting fed up with this stupid mission. He gritted his teeth as he plunged into an icy cold stream, washing himself as quickly as physically possible before shooting out again, drying himself and dressing rapidly. Rubbing a towel through his wet hair, he wandered back towards camp, thinking longingly of hot baths and proper beds in mountains instead of these endless trees and home in general. Stupid Konoha. As he neared camp, he heard Maro and Jiro arguing again. He sighed heavily, but didn't pause on his way back to them, tuning in on the conversation as he plonked down next to the burned-out fire. "I'm telling you, there is no way that will work," Maro snapped. "If you think that Hatake is stupid enough to leave his house unwarded, I can bypass any ward," Jiro interrupted. "And it's the only time the bastard takes his eyes off the brat, when he's asleep." "I still say we need to gather more information," Maro argued. "We've been trailing them for 2 weeks. Jiro retorted. "If we wait much longer, we'll be found out." "Perhaps we could lure him out," Dai mused boredly. He rolled his eyes at the twin scoffs he received. "No way. Not going to work." And then they were back to arguing. Dai dropped his head on his hands and mused that this was in no way worth what he was being paid for it. Like a silent ghost, a new figure darted into their camp. "Pack it up, boys and girls," it said in a sing-song voice. "We're moving out." The other 3 men looked up in amazement as their team leader Kane stood before them, the objective of their mission held tight and sleeping in his arms. "You got him," exclaimed Jiro. "How?" frowned Dai. "You better not have raised the alarm, Kane," threatened Maro. Kane shifted the child in his arms and waved the concern away. "Nah, but I'd advise we move out before his father realizes he's gone, hey? Come on, hustle." The others all winced at the thought and quickly set about demolishing any trace of the camp. Within 5 minutes, they were on the move, heading back to their village. Kakashi was halfway through buying milk and butter when he glanced down and didn't see Naruto standing obediently beside him. His heart leapt in his chest, and for a moment, Kakashi fell victim to absolute panic, spinning and scanning the area around him frantically for the sight of the small, yellow-haired child. He couldn't see him, and for a moment the panic threatened to overwhelm him, but then his ninja training took over and he forced the feeling back. Calm down. He can't have gone far, he reasoned with himself. Without a thought, he set his groceries down right there and striding away through the bustling market, eyes scanning the area rapidly. He stubbornly fought down the sick feeling in his gut, as well as the horrible what-ifs circling in his mind. When it became apparent he wasn't going to find the kid easily by himself, he bit into his thumb without hesitation and flashed through a series of hand signs before slamming his palm down on the ground firmly. With a flash of chakra and a small cloud of smoke, Pakun appeared. Yo, the pug said. What's up? He paused, sniffing the air. You smell worried, Kakashi. What's happened? Where's the little one? That's the problem, Pakun, Kakashi said, bristling at the accusation. He's lost. And I do not smell worried. I'm a seasoned shinobi, I don't worry. Whatever you say, boss, Pakun snorted. Then what the man had actually said clicked and his head jerked up, mild panic filling his eyes. Wait, did you say missing? Then why are we just standing here? Let's find him. Kakashi nodded and Pakun scrambled to his paws, shoving his nose down into the dirt to search for the well-known smell of his master's puppy. Hem, the pug hummed to himself as he led Kakashi through the marketplace, unconsciously tracing the shopping route Kakashi had taken. Yes, okay. So he was still with you here, and then you turned this corner. He's still with you, and then you stopped at this stall here and, What? Kakashi demanded, then winced at how anxious he sounded. What do you smell? He tried again, managing to sound much more controlled. Pakun glanced at him and continued tracking, even as he answered. Your scent stays there, by the stall, but his wanders over this way, by itself. He must have seen something that caught his interest, or something. Kakashi nodded, that was likely. Naruto had just wandered away, and was probably even now searching blindly for his daddy, frightened and tired, but unharmed and in no danger. A small amount of relief spread throughout the Hatake, even as he felt guilty. He hadn't noticed the kid's absence for more than 15 minutes. Then, no, shit. Pakun snarled, hackles rising. Kakashi twitched. What? He snapped, not caring this time how anxious he sounded. Pakun looked up at him with serious chocolate eyes. Kakashi, he was taken, he said seriously. Kakashi felt his heart freeze. What do you mean? He asked in a low voice. The dog closed his eyes. I mean, someone took him, Kakashi. Someone picked him up and carried him away. Foreign scent. There was a pause as that sunk in. Pakun looked up to see the visible skin on Kakashi's face was paper white. No, he whispered, and took off top speed. Naruto blinked groggily, shifting slowly. His head hurt, his throat was dry, and above all he missed Daddy. It took him a moment to figure out why he was feeling so miserable and frightened, before he remembered what had happened before he had fallen asleep. Instantly, he gave a distressed cry and began to move, writhing in his spot in an attempt to sit up. It took him a long moment to realize that someone had draped a rough blanket over him, and he began to cry plaintively. Instantly, a shape moved towards him and touched him gently, and Naruto flinched violently. He cracked his eyes open to see a red-haired man with scars crisscrossing his left cheek. What's wrong with it? The red-haired man was asking, but he wasn't looking at Naruto. No, he was looking over the small body at the others gathered there. Naruto spun his head, taking in all of them, black hair, brown hair, green hair, and began to cry harder. Might be scared, offered black hair. I sure as hell would be. It's probably thirsty. The sleep jutsu does that, green hair said dismissively, unscrewing the cap of a bottle. He grabbed Naruto and forced him to sit up, kneeling behind him and weaving his hand through gold hair, tilting the child's head back and forcibly placing the bottle at his lips. Drink, you brat, he added roughly. Naruto gagged and spluttered, managing to swallow some but not nearly all of the cool, metal-tasting liquid that flooded his mouth. The rest splashed down over his front, soaking his shirt through. His tears leaked faster and he struggled against the cruel grip on his hair, desperate to be free. Hey, Maro, how's about you don't drown the kid? Brown Hair said, tugging green hair away and smiling at Naruto gently. Hey, your name is Naruto, right? I'm Kane. It's okay now. You just be good, and no one will hurt you. I want dad die, Naruto choked, curling into a defensive ball. The adults exchanged glances and leers. Do you now? Black Hair droned. Fat chance, Green Hair snapped, not after all the trouble we went to get you away from bloody Hatake. You're not going to be staying with your daddy anymore, Red Hair said quietly. Naruto froze. I'm not, he asked haltingly. Kane shook his head. No, he said gently. Look, this is Dai, he pointed at Red Hair, Maro, Green Hair, and Jiro. Black Hair. We're ninja from Kumokagure. We're here to take you home. Don't you see? You were born in Lightning Country, you belong with us. Yeah, we totally have claim to a Hatake. Jiro said enthusiastically. No way are we giving that up. No matter what bastard wants his baby home with him, Maro added snidely. Shouldn't have screwed around with a lightning girl in the first place, should he? Little harsh, Maro, Dai commented dryly. Naruto stared around at them all, uncomprehending. But, I don't wanna leave daddy, he said, his lips trembling as tears threatened to fall again. I love daddy. There was an awkward pause. He'll forget, Kane said confidently. Then, to Naruto, come on, kid. Enough of a break. We need to keep moving. Naruto watched the man reach out to grab him, and just like that, his fear and uncertainty vanished. In its place was a sort of quivery determination that filled his whole body. They wouldn't take him. He wouldn't let them. And then daddy would come and kick their butts. His blue eyes narrowed and he quickly scrambled to his feet, falling into a taijutsu stance his daddy had taught him. The next second, Kane grabbed for him, and the fight began. Kakashi slammed into the Hokage's office, totally bypassing both the secretary in the foyer and the Chunin guards stationed outside the office door, Pakun hot on his heels. Naruto. He's been abducted, he burst out, cutting right across what looked like a briefing for a mission. The Junin squad all looked rather affronted, and then shocked and sympathetic as they realized why exactly their fellow Junin had interrupted. Sarutobi paused for a moment to gather himself. Kakashi, calm down, he said firmly. What has happened? Naruto has been abducted, taken out of the village. Kakashi repeated agitatedly. Don't know who or why, but they were in the marketplace, and I looked away for a second, and Pakun says they grabbed him right there. Please, Hokage-sama, grant me leave to leave the village. I need to find him. Sarutobi blinked. Wait, he said. He turned to the Junin team gathered in his office. You can go, you have your orders, he said. The four Junin nodded and disappeared, leaving Kakashi and Pakun alone with the old man. Kakashi, take a moment to calm yourself. I will gather a Chunin squad to go with you. But, Kakashi began to protest the delay, but a look from Sarutobi silenced him. Please hurry, he murmured. The half an hour he was forced to wait while a team was assembled and briefed was easily the most tortuous, the most painful he had ever experienced, including that time when he was being interrogated in Iowa and they'd poured acid over his body. Finally, it was time to leave. Kakashi jerked to his feet and swept his eyes over the three Chunin assembled, pretty good for a last-minute thing, but not the ninja he would have chosen if he could have. Kurenai, one of the kunoichi from his age group, all set for the Junin exam next month, and two people Kakashi knew only by sight and name, Kamizuki Izumo and Hagane Katetsu, 18, relatively new to being Chunin. Kakashi fidgeted as the Hokage gave them a few last-minute orders and was out the window before Sarutobi had even completed the word, go. It was a moment before the Chunin realized what had happened, and they exchanged confused looks, but the Sandaime just sighed and waved them after him. Catch up if you can, he advised. Then they were off. Naruto sank his teeth into the arm that reached towards him, throwing a punch at the near body of the big man. When he tasted blood, he let go instantly, spitting and gagging, only just computing Kane's cry of pain as he did so. Ah, the feral little son of a bitch! He shouted, clapping his hand over the perfect ring of teeth marks he now had bleeding on his arm. That's gonna scar you. Son of a bastard, you mean, Maro corrected, eyes fixed on the panting 4-year-old who was standing slightly clumsily in his best fighting stance. Of course Hatake would teach ickle bastard a few fighting moves. Damn it. Well, wasn't Daddy Hatake already, like, a genin by the age of this runt? Dai asked. We could have a fight on our hands. Bah, Jiro scoffed. He's still just a kid. Grab him. While they were talking, the four of them had circled around Naruto, forming a 4-point ring to hem in the wide-eyed child. Naruto spun his head, searching for an escape route, and just barely managed to dodge out of the way when Maro made a lunge at him. Just like WIV Daddy, the blonde thought to himself grimly, ducking under Kane's arms to deliver a punishing kick to the shins. Somehow, it wasn't even remotely fun, unlike when he played like this with Daddy. Daddy, Naruto choked on a sob as arms enveloped him, and he began to claw at them, squirming, biting, kicking, elbowing and punching to get loose. Somehow, he slipped through the arms and fell to the ground. I won. Go WIV them. I can. Dai had a hold on him now, hoisting him into the air by his arms and crushing him against his chest, so all the little teeth could find to bite into was a tough Junin vest. Naruto squirmed desperately, reaching, stretching. I just has to hold on. He felt his hand brush the coarse material, and jerked, managing to slide that crucial inch and a half closer. Daddy will come. He's gonna come get me. He promised. Little fingers curled around a hard cylinder, and Naruto blinked to rid himself of tears before jerking his hand back, inadvertently driving his elbow into Dai's right tricep. Dai didn't even notice, being too preoccupied with a squirming body and flailing legs. Daddy, please hurry. I'm frightened. This last mental plea echoing in his mind, Naruto gritted his teeth and swung his arm, driving his clenched right fist with all his might against Dai's hip, the only place his short arms could reach in his current position. It worked. Dai swore loudly and Naruto was once again dropped to the ground, where he dragged himself to his feet and fell back into a wobbly, ready, stance, stolen kunai held out before him, red blood dripping off it slowly. Brat, he stabbed me. Whined Dai. Kane, that sleep jutsu of yours would be good around about now, Jiro prompted, taking a step forwards and jerking back as Naruto slashed at him. The men looked angry now. Naruto was trembling, more frightened than he'd ever been as he tried desperately to stand tall and be brave. Daddy. Pakun led the retrieval team through the trees at breakneck speed, the scent of the kidnappers fresh enough for him to follow it easily. Kakashi was right on his tail, almost literally, to the point where he was glad he didn't have a long bushy tail like Ryu or Shiba. If he had, it would have already been trodden on by his frantic master. Kakashi was himself more frightened than he could ever remember being. The day Obito died, the Kyuubi attack, every single assassination, it all paled in comparison to this feeling. What would he do if Naruto was gone? Dead, or lost to him forever? No. Kakashi shoved that thought away. He wouldn't let that happen. No matter what it took, he would get Naruto back. He wouldn't let anyone steal his son from him like this. The Junin missed a beat as he realized his thoughts, and a second later his mind settled into a sort of grim understanding. Yes, Naruto was his son. Nothing would ever change that. He'd raised, cared for, fed, nursed, loved, yes, he truly loved him. More than anything. And now, paternal instinct was rearing in him, ugly and animalistic. He would tear apart the ones who dared to take his son from him. That was a promise. He just regretted that it took something like this for him to realize it. Cursing himself for not seeing, not understanding, for never telling the boy, his son, just how much he meant to his daddy, Kakashi gritted his teeth and put on another burst of speed, making Pakun yelp and begin to pump harder, trying to keep pace. Keep up. The Hataki snarled back at the winded Chunin following him, not caring one jot that they were growing tired. Not far now, Pakun panted at him, glancing at him long enough for Kakashi to spot the fire in his usually gentle eyes. The pug was as angry as he, well, almost as angry as he was. It was impossible to be as angry as a scared father. But Pakun loved Naruto, too. His pack leader's puppy. Just up ahead, the small animal barked. They're on the ground, not moving. We should be there. Right, now. Kakashi forced himself to stop in a tree 100 meters back when Pakun did and observe the situation. Below them, 4 tall figures circled a fifth, smaller one. Kakashi's eyes, used to spotting such details, quickly spotted and logged their Kumo Hitai and their defensive stances, before flicking to Naruto and seeing the bloody kunai in his hand. From this angle, he couldn't see the child's face, but he could see that he was shivering. Several of the men were bleeding, and Kakashi felt a stab of pride despite everything. That's my boy. The man with brown hair was flicking through hand signs, and suddenly there was a flare of chakra and Naruto gave a distressed cry before crumpling. The man with green hair caught him and lifted him roughly, slinging the limp body over his shoulder carelessly. Kakashi leant forwards and snarled, sounding more like a dog than Pakun did, and launched himself right into the midst of the kidnappers, Hitai up, Sharingan glowing an angry red, a deadly, demonic fury written across Kakashi's whole stance. There was just enough time for one of the deadmen who dared to touch his son to say in a slow "Okay, what do we do now" tone, "Sheet," before, for the first time since Obito had died, Kakashi lost himself to anger. Katetsu was running, trying to catch up with his crazy squad leader, when suddenly the beautiful woman, Kurenai, wasn't it, that was on their squad caught him around the shoulders and sent them both crashing to a stop on a tree branch. Azumo banged into them from behind. What? Katetsu began, but Kurenai just pointed ahead and below them. One glance, and both teenagers were suddenly highly relieved she had stopped them. The carnage was unbelievable. Within 10 minutes, the horrible sounds below them stopped, and Katetsu felt it was safe to uncover his eyes and look again. Kakashi Senpai was kneeling in the middle of the bodies of the men he'd fought, no, slaughtered, cradling the limp body of the kid they'd been sent to recover tight to his chest, his face buried in the boy's blonde hair. Kurenai was the first one who dared to move. She knew Kakashi, so she felt a measure of reassurance in the thought that he probably would recognize her before he attacked her. She had seen ninja in this state before, and knew that it would take very little to set him off again. Cautiously, she jumped down from her tree branch, landing lightly before him. Katetsu and Azumo watched her as if she were crazy. Kakashi, she called, not moving any closer. For a long moment, he didn't respond, but just as Kurenai was preparing to back off and give him some time to try and drag his mind back together, his head lifted and he looked directly at her. To her very great relief, he didn't seem angry any longer, rather, frightened and grieving. Then, the moment passed and, like a switch had been flipped, Kakashi the father was put away and Kakashi the shinobi was back. Kurenai, he said, his voice perfectly level as he raised a hand to pull his Hitai down over his Sharingan eye. He didn't let go of Naruto for a second. Naruto, is he? Kurenai was afraid to ask. Kakashi shook his head, settling back to sit on the blood-splattered ground, heedless of the corpses around him. He's alive, but I can't get him to wake up, he said, a touch of despair worming its way into his voice. I think I recognized those hand seals, Kurenai offered. I'm fairly sure it was a genjutsu. Do you want me to have a look at him? Instantly, Kakashi's arms tightened around the unconscious boy protectively, but after a moment good sense won out and he sighed, nodding once and laying the boy down in his lap, flicking a finger to call Kurenai over. Understandably, Kurenai hesitated, not very anxious to approach the man she'd just seen tear 4 junin bigger than himself limb from limb, almost literally. Suddenly, she understood why exactly Kakashi had graduated and been promoted so early. He was brilliant and terrifying. Reminding herself firmly that it was still Kakashi, and that he hadn't changed, just her perception of him, Kurenai moved closer, kneeling before the man. She could sense that he was as tense as a coiled spring as she carefully reached out a hand to examine Naruto, and made sure all her movements were slow and non-threatening. After a moment, she was sure. It's just a mild sleep jutsu, she reported. He's fine, not in any pain. I can remove it, but it's safest just to let it wear off naturally. It should only take a couple of hours or so, and he'll wake up feeling like he's just had a nap. Is that okay? After a pause, Kakashi nodded. Hooking his arms around Naruto and hugging him close again, he stood, saying, "Let's get him home, then. The two boys can gather what's left of them." He jerked his head at the bodies, and up in the tree, Azumo and Katetsu both winced. Naruto came back to the world groggily, unwillingly. Eventually, he was awake enough to recognize the warmth around him, the iron arms hooked under his shoulders and knees, holding him close to a strong chest, the sensation of movement as the person carrying him leapt between trees. The last thing he remembered was Kane doing that some jutsu thing on him, and him feeling really sleepy, and Naruto let out a choked sob as he realized he must be being carried by one of those horrible men that were taking him away. He began to struggle weakly, tear-stinging eyes he had yet to open. The arms hugged him tighter for a moment, and a jolt ran through Naruto as the man spoke. "There now. Don't worry, Naru, I've got you." He knew that voice. That was. Naruto's eyes flew open and he looked up at his daddy's masked face, his mouth opening slightly in surprise as relief flooded through him so sharp it hurt. "Daddy," he croaked. Kakashi glanced down at him and responded by holding him even tighter. "I'm here, son. You found me," Naruto mumbled tearfully. "You came. I knew you'd come, Daddy." Kakashi shifted Naruto so that he was held up against his chest, and Naruto put his hands around Daddy's neck and breathed in the comforting smell that was his father, beginning to sob openly. Kakashi just rubbed his back, murmuring in his ear softly even as he continued the journey back to Konoha without breaking stride. "Shish, it's okay, don't worry. I would never let them take you away. I'm sorry I didn't get there sooner, Naruto. I love you. Everything is going to be okay. You're safe now. I love you. I love you, my son." Blonde child huddled under the stairs, waiting with bated breath, mentally counting down the seconds. He had to restart twice because he lost his place, and so was a good 30 seconds off when. Crash. Bang. Splatter. Crack, tinkle tinkle. Crackle. Swoosh. There was a long, intense pause. Then, "Naruto." The child flinched, his grin unwavering. "Woo." Daddy sounded angry. "This one must have been good. Naruto. Get out here." Naruto's smile slipped a bit. Okay, Daddy really was mad. Whoops. See, this was the crucial downfall of each of Naruto's plots. He always forgot that there would be consequences for his experiments. "Hatake Naruto, I'm going to give you a 10-second immunity. If you're not out here in that time, you will be punished for hiding from me." Okay. Daddy was still screaming. The only time Daddy yelled was when he was world-endingly mad. Time to do as he was told. Naruto quickly squirmed out of his hiding place and trotted to where he could hear his father counting down. He found him in the hallway, beside the door leading into the kitchen. His chest was smeared with blue paint, some of which had been blackened with a fire, and was glaring something awful with one eye as water trickled from his hair down his bare back. He'd just gotten out of the shower, and was only half dressed. Naruto winced, cringing away from the furious expression on his father's bared face. I'm sorry," he said tentatively. Kakashi pointed one hand at the open doorway, and Naruto took the cue to look. There were blue paint and glass shards everywhere, and black fire marks dotted liberally throughout the kitchen, and water pooling on every surface. What? Kakashi said, his voice shaking just a little as he tried to rein in the emotions warring inside him and remember that it was a 5-year-old who had done this. Who knew someone so small could cause so much damage? Did you hope to accomplish by putting paint in the coffee machine, and then switching the machine on? Naruto looked away and scuffed the floor with one bare foot. Well, I found the paint, and I was wondering if making it hot'd make it dry, and so I thought I put it in the coffee maker. It was experiment. Kakashi closed his eye. An experiment. Of course. This child would be the death of him. But oh, what a way to go. Naruto, remember what I told you about doing experiments? What were the rules I gave you? Naruto bit his lip. I have to tell you, Daddy, and you have to say it's okay, and, not inside the house. Right. Kakashi felt himself calming down and tried to think rationally. No one had gotten hurt, although now he had a trashed kitchen and a blue, highly ticked pug dog to track down. Naruto hadn't meant any harm. Nevertheless, he had broken the rules. Rules his father had lain down to protect him and the people and things around him, such as Pakun and his poor kitchen. You've broken all 3 of those rules, Naruto, and so you are going to have to be punished. God, how he hated those big blue eyes. Stupid blue eyes staring at him with such remorse and guilt, silently asking for mercy. Kakashi ruthlessly squashed any thoughts of going easy on the brat. No allowance for a month, he decided. Since his 5th birthday, Naruto had been receiving a small amount of pocket money every week to spend however he wished, in a bid from his father to teach him how to handle and appreciate money. In bed an hour early for 2 weeks. And you can go run laps in the yard for as long as it takes me to clean up this mess. Do you understand? Yes, Daddy. Naruto, for his part, looked genuinely repentant. I'm sorry. Kakashi let it hang for a moment, before nodding at him. I forgive you, he said gravely. For your information, paint is flammable, and so when exposed to the high pressure and temperature inside the coffee maker, it caught fire, causing the coffee maker to explode and splattering burning paint over the whole room. I then used a sweetened jutsu to put out the flames. Cool. Naruto exploded, eyes lighting up at the mental image. Then he caught sight of his father's expression and winced, sobering instantly. Sorry. I shouldn't have done it. Kakashi groaned. Go get dressed properly, he said to the young boy standing before him in his pajamas, and I'll do the same, and then we'll get you started on your laps while I start cleaning up this mess. Naruto nodded and turned to run away, stumbling twice on the way up the stairs, but made it to his room without major injury. Quickly, he squirmed into his day clothes, knocking over a pile of 8 to 10-year-olds' adventure books written in kanji he'd received as a gift from his father for his birthday 2 months beforehand. Plonking down on the floor, he wrapped the set of training weights his father had deemed him ready for around each of his shins. They were really very light, only weighing about a kilogram combined, but it was still significant for a 5-year-old, and wrestled on his special weighted jacket, which weighed a total of 3 kilograms distributed evenly over his back, chest and shoulders. The whole point was to build up the strength in his young body. Naruto didn't like the way the weights dragged at him, nor the way he always felt tired and sore at the end of the day when he'd worn them, but he liked the way they made stuff that used to be easy a challenge, like the game was new all over again, and he liked that they would help him grow up to be a big strong ninja just like Daddy. There was almost nothing Naruto wouldn't do to achieve his dream of being just like his daddy. He even consented to eat the icky green things Daddy was forever putting on his plate. Naruto thought they were called vegetables. Ick. After checking in with his father in the hallway again, he trotted to the yard and began his punishment laps, keeping to a jog because he knew he'd likely be running for a long time. Watching him, Kakashi sighed heavily and began collecting brooms, mops and cleaning rags. This was going to take work. Kakashi scrubbed listlessly at a patch of dried paint. He wasn't even halfway done, but he knew he'd have to take pity on Naruto and let him stop soon, the child had been running for the last hour, with only 2 10-minute drink breaks. Maybe he'd set him studying instead. Another 10 minutes dragged by, and Kakashi put down his cleaning cloth, moving to the door leading from kitchen to yard and calling, "Naruto. That's enough. Walk a lap, then come inside." The blonde stopped running immediately and gave a tired nod, panting hard. Kakashi smiled under his mask at the thought that there was a chance Naruto would actually sleep during his nap today, rather than just pretending and crawling out of bed to play every time he thought his father was too far away to hear. Giving up, Kakashi lay aside the cleaning gear and moved to the miraculously untouched refrigerator, pulling out food and beginning to ferry it to the table in the dining room. "Wash your hands and come sit down," he called when he heard the door open and close. Water ran in the trashed kitchen as Naruto washed his hands in the sink there, and the sound of small feet pattered through the house for a few moments before a little head poked sheepishly into the dining room. Upon discerning that Daddy was not indeed still angry, Naruto grinned and came into plonk at the Eastern-style table, crossing his legs and shuffling the cushion that served as a chair closer to the low wooden surface. Kakashi sat down opposite him and quickly set a meal in front of him, idly listening to Naruto's babbling. "I ran 37 times around the yard, and I'm so hungry now but am tired too, and I think after this can I not do my lessons yet please cause I don't think'll think good'n." "Well," Kakashi interjected, "you won't concentrate well." Naruto didn't even pause to acknowledge the correction and just kept right on talking, only stopping with a cry of delight when his father finally grew tired of the chatter and placed Oink on the table. "Ya found him," Naruto exclaimed, grabbing the toy and hugging it close. "Oink. He was lost but you got. I am back. Daddy, you're the best Ivar." Kakashi watched, amused, as the 5-year-old fussed over his previously lost toy. He was still such a little kid, it was so cute. "Next time you leave him behind, I might not be able to collect him," he cautioned. "It was sheer luck that Ayame-san put him aside for you when you left him at Ichiraku's. You need to be more careful, okay?" Naruto nodded obediently, tucking Oink firmly against his belly and digging back into his food. Kakashi watched him, not eating much himself, but rather just toying with the food on his plate. How to broach the topic he sorely needed to discuss with the boy. After a long while tossing different approaches back and forth in his mind, he sighed and put his cup down on the table with a clink. "Naruto," he said carefully, an internal twitch going off as Naruto looked up, cheeks bulging with the amount of food he'd stuffed into his mouth, his other hand smashing a handful of cold noodles repeatedly into Oink's face. Damn, and he'd just washed the toy, too. Putting the thought aside, Kakashi leant forwards and said, "Naru pup, even though I haven't been working since you were born, you do know that it's Daddy's job to be a ninja, right?" Naruto nodded. Uh-huh. He agreed. "My daddy's the best ninja ever. 'Cause you're all like, super ninja power. And then the bad guys are like, huh, and you're like, grr. And the baddies are like, meep. And then it's like, bang, smack, kaboom. And it's totally awesome." Kakashi didn't even try to follow the child's speech, choosing instead to take it as a simple acknowledgement of his father's occupation, and continued. "Because of everything that happened around the time you were born, with your mama and everything, Hokage-sama gave me an extended leave of absence," he said, noticing the way Naruto stilled when his fictional mother was mentioned. "But now, Sarutobi-sama has requested that I go back to work. I'm going to start taking on missions again." Naruto was staring at him, the expression on his face a mixture between confusion and apprehension. "But, does that mean you won't be here no more?" he asked carefully. "Any more," Kakashi corrected automatically. "And no, I'll still be here, just not as much. Sometimes I might have to leave you overnight or for a few days, but mostly I should be home every night for dinner, and I'll leave one of the dogs with you if I'll be gone for any longer. But you're not going to be here alone, Naru." Naruto his head, frowning. "I'm not. Nope." Kakashi leant back and ran a hand through his hair. You have been enrolled in first form at the academy. Starting Monday next week, you're going to be going to school. There was a long pause, Naruto's eyes growing steadily wider and wider. Kakashi braced himself for the inevitable ear-shattering squeal. Cool. Ah, there it was. Later that day, Naruto was pouting, arms crossed and cheeks puffed out as Kakashi sat cross-legged on the living room floor, calmly blunting his kunai. About 2 months ago, he deemed Naruto ready for the sharp blades, though he still had yet to teach him how to actually sharpen them. However, Monday was his first day at the academy, and Kakashi wasn't dumb enough to think Naruto would consent to leaving his ninja weapons behind, and there was no way he was going to let a 5-year-old take sharp knives to school. But why can't I take sharp kunai to the academy? Naruto whined, stamping his foot. Kakashi set aside a newly blunted kunai, resting it on the pile, and lifted one with sharp edges that glinted in the light. Because you'll be around lots and lots of idiots, he said flatly. Naruto blinked. Ooh, and he was happy again. Kakashi shook his head. Mental note. Remember that excuse. Naruto bit his lip and looked around shyly. He was seated at his new desk while all around him kids his own age were chattering, squealing, bouncing up and down and racing around the room, overly excited by the prospect of their very first day of school. Naruto knew a couple of them by sight from the park, but hadn't spent much time playing with any of them. Because he often chose to hang out with Kiba, and Kiba flatly refused to tolerate anyone younger than himself other than Naruto, the Hatake didn't interact much with those his own age. Soon, the teacher, Naoko-sensei, called them to order, and soon she managed to settle every child behind the desk with their name written it on a white sticker. Okay, she said, smiling around at the room of children. Welcome to your first day at the academy. Now, I'm sure to some of you, this is a little scary and new, but don't worry. Soon, you'll be pros at our way of doing things. Now, you are all here to learn how to be ninja. Naoko-sensei pressed a button on a projector situated at the front of the classroom and a large map lit up the blackboard. Naruto sat up straighter. He recognized the map. It was one of the 5 great shinobi nations, as well as the smaller ones dotted between them. I'm sure you're all aware it is a ninja's duty to protect its village. In our case, you will all grow to protect Konoha, but it is much more than that. There are hidden villages dotted all over our continent, each with ninja to protect the country they are situated in. Ninja also support the village by taking on missions that they are then paid for. There are 4 ranks of missions. Naruto found his mind wandering away from the lecture. He already knew all this stuff, but Daddy had told him that kids coming from civilian families wouldn't, so he didn't complain, instead watching the flight path of 2 birds out the window. They danced together, drawing invisible lines in the air that fascinated him. They seemed to be building a nest in the tree just outside the fence marking the edge of the playground. Maybe they were going to have eggs, and then the eggs would hatch out into baby birds that Naruto could climb the tree to see. The young blonde's thoughts drifted to his own family, and he wondered what his father was doing right now. He missed his daddy desperately right now, but refused to be a baby and say anything. A shinobi walked by on the road, passing the tree the birds were flitting in and out of. Naruto sat up a bit straighter, trying to see who it was. It looked like maybe Raito-san, but from behind it was hard to tell. Hatake Naruto-chan. Pay attention, okay, do you know the answer? Naruto jumped. Naoko-sensei was looking at him expectantly, and the blonde flushed red. She obviously knew he hadn't heard the question at all, too absorbed in the outside world to listen. Biting his lip, he scanned the front of the room for clues. The map was still projected up the front, and several notes had been scratched up beside it, written hastily as if Naoko-sensei didn't expect anyone to actually read them. He took a stab in the dark, eyes settling on the kanji for rules, and said, Shinobi are governed by a set of guidelines called the Shinobi Laws or Shinobi Rules, 163 in total, that tell them how to live, fight and serve. And Even though all of them are important, the first 25 are the most important. Naoko-sensei looked shocked. Yes, that's right, Naruto-chan, she said eventually. How did you know that? Naruto shrugged. My daddy taught me, he said simply, uncomfortable. Did she want him to list the rules as well? He hoped not, because he could never remember them past number 42. Why was she staring at him like that? That's a little advanced for right now, though it was a very good summary, the teacher praised, still staring at him like he'd grown a second head. Do you think you could answer my question, though? Do you know the 4 different ranks our missions are given? Naruto grinned. Oh, is that what you wanted? He asked. I wasn't listening, so I just guessed. Then he frowned, suddenly confused. But, sensei, there are more in 4 ranks. There's D, C, B, A, S, SS and SSS, but only the Anbu and the bestest best ninja get the SES. Oh, and there's unranked, which are way too dangerous to be put into a class. They're like the missions for people like the Hokage and my daddy. Daddy says I'm a unranked mission all on myself, but he's being silly. The teacher's mouth was slack, hanging slightly open, and she appeared frozen, but Naruto had run out of stuff to talk about concerning mission ranking, so he just stayed quiet. As seconds stretched and the other kids began to fidget and whisper, Naruto squirmed uncomfortably, wondering if his sensei wanted him to explain what level of ninja took each ranked level of mission, but lost his nerve and meekly decided to just stay silent until asked. After another long moment, the teacher tore her eyes away and nodded, saying, well, for now we're only going to focus on ranks A, B, C and D. As she continued her lecture, Naruto found himself losing interest again. Naoko-sensei didn't call on him again. It was a relief when it was time for Naoko-sensei to herd her students outside for some exercise. Keeping the first form children still and quiet and listening as they learned theory was nigh on impossible, and she often wondered if they wouldn't get more done mimicking the civilian school and teaching through games and play. But woe betide the Chunin who suggested as much to the school board of education, much less the council. This year, the children would be brought up to scratch in fitness, their small bodies punished until they reached the staring point, the place where they were physically capable to begin learning shinobi arts. Second form and above was where they'd learn all those, so Naoko-sensei's job in this area was a relatively simple one. She put her hands on her hips and smiled at the waist-high children all about her. Okay, she said brightly, now, you are going to run some laps around the courtyard here, okay? See the tracks around the edge of the yard there? I want you to run around it 5 times. She held up 5 careful fingers for everyone to see. Ready, go. Fast as you can. Naruto agreeably took off, jogging in the middle of his class. This courtyard was about as big as his backyard at home, so 5 laps wouldn't be too hard. He didn't understand, however, why everyone else was going so slowly. Daddy had strapped on his weights this morning, but even with the added burden, he wanted to go faster than his classmates. Were those girls panting? It had only been half a lap. Naoko-sensei sighed as she watched the young Hatake break rank and continue running. She would be willing to bet every drop of coffee in the academy staff room that his father had been training him, and hummed in disapproval. I don't like that. He would have been a toddler when his father started him. Pressuring a little kid like that can't be good. The little blonde, who actually wasn't so little compared to the others, he stood a head above the most of them, which Naoko-sensei supposed was telling of good, strong genes, passed his class again, now a full lap ahead of them. It really shouldn't surprise her that the kid was so advanced. When his father was his age, he'd already made genin, if rumors were to be believed. And who hadn't heard the rumors surrounding the Hatake family? Whispers of genius and prodigal talent followed them everywhere. There were a few darker rumors, but Naoko-sensei was too young to have heard much about the Hatake generation before Hatake Kakashi-san. Naruto stopped in front of her. He was panting a little, but didn't look overly winded. The others had yet to complete their third lap. Many had stopped running and were walking instead. Done, sensei. The blonde chirped. Naoko-sensei knelt, putting herself on the 5-year-old's level. Naruto-chan, am I right when I say you've done this before? She asked gently. Naruto nodded enthusiastically. Uh-huh, he said. Daddy and I go running all the time. Well, I run, Daddy jogs. His legs are long, and it's not fair. But he says I'll grow, Naruto added hopefully. Naoko-sensei frowned. And from what earlier, I'd assume you have also been taught about the shinobi rules and our mission system. Again, Naruto nodded. And you've learned other things as well. Daddy teaches me, the blonde said solemnly. Then he pulled a face. I has to do 3 hours a day of bookwork before I can do anything fun, he complained. Naoko-sensei sighed as Naruto pouted, lost in his lamentation of the unfairness of his life. Why don't you do another few laps while the others finish off? The Hatake nodded and obediently took off. His teacher watched him go, biting her lip musingly. It was break time. Naruto was standing in the playground, a frown in place. He made no move to join his agemates in their play, and instead scanned the teeming children around him until Kiba. The Inuzuka spun around, a grin splitting his face as Naruto sprinted up to him. Well, hello, midget. Naruto pouted. Not, he said. He beamed proudly. Bigger than all my class. He had been very pleased to notice as much. Kiba patted him sharply on the head. Still smaller than me, midget. You're finally in school, huh? Hey, about time. But then, someone as little as you would take time to catch us big kids up. Naruto's smile disappeared faster than a fox down a hole or the dog that chased it there. I'm not little, he shouted. Kiba scoffed. I'm 7, you're 5. You are too little. Naruto pouted again, then allowed his grin back onto his face, traditional argument complete. The wild brunette ran a hand through his tangled hair. So, how are you liking school so far? He asked. Naruto stuck out his tongue. Blah. It's boring, he whined. Kiba laughed. Well, duh, if it makes you feel any better, there's a swing over there. He laughed harder as Naruto's entire body lit up at the news and the 5-year-old turned to race to the favored play device. Naoko-sensei watched contemplatively from the window as Naruto jumped over Kiba's leg when the Inuzuka tried to trip him and outmaneuvered the older boy until he could punch him solidly in the chest, and sighed. Then she turned away to go back inside and search out a certain set of paperwork. 3 days after Naruto's first day at the Academy, as he had begun to fondly think of it, Kakashi settled in his armchair, pulling a wad of letters towards him. Naruto was finally down for the night, after helping him with the dinner dishes, and his father had chosen this time to go through his mail. He mused mentally, flicking through the letters. Bill, letter from old friend, wasn't he dead? Oh, well, Bill, notice, memo, summons, oh for the love the gods. Kakashi paused to set fire to yet another pornographic magazine. Jiraiya the legendary bastard kept subscribing to them in Kakashi's name, having them mailed to the Hatake household. So, where was I? Right, Bill, notice, ashes, letter from the Academy, what could Naru have done already? Okay, this one I'll read. Curiously, he opened the letter, slitting the envelope and pulling out the carefully printed note, scanning it quickly. It was a letter from Naruto's teacher, a highly detailed and logical explanation as to why his son should be given careful consideration. He was highly advanced for his age and so was bored and idle in the lowest form, and although it was good for children to be with others their own age, Naruto really was better off in a higher grade, and how Naoko-sensei had filled out the forms required to move the child up a grade, though they still needed Kakashi's signature, and that she encouraged him to think about it and come speak to her before he made his decision. Kakashi set the letter down and flicked through the forms, before chuckling and reaching for a pen. Quickly, he scribbled his name on the dotted line waiting for his signature, slipping the forms back into the envelope. As an afterthought, He added a note. Knock yourself out, Naruto will love being bigger. As he resealed the packet and set it aside, he shook his head. I do hope this doesn't go to the kid's head. Akemi-sensei flicked black hair out of his eyes and looked around at his class plus one. Today, Monday, week 2, he had a new student. Hitaki Naruto was sitting in the third row, blonde hair just visible over the girl in front of him, looking completely unremarkable and just a fraction smaller than the others in the room. He could have been any random kid in this class. Though, Akemi-sensei had to admit, even if the coloring was wrong, Naruto had definitely inherited his gravity-defying, never-been-brushed hair from his father. Also, allegedly, ability, little Hitaki Chibi had already been bumped up a grade. Naruto himself was frowning at his teacher. 1 week had been all it took to thoroughly disenchant him about school. It was boring and mind-numbing, not to mention extremely degrading. He'd been told that this week he'd be with a more advanced class, but didn't hold much hope that it would challenge him at all, judging from the katakana letters on the blackboard. He wasn't even sure these so-called chunin were really teachers. They certainly didn't act like Daddy, and everyone knew Daddy was the bestest ninja in the whole universe. So he settled into a perfect disgusted little boy pose, arms crossed, are you kidding or just dumb expression firmly, and unconsciously, in place. Alright, kids, Akemi-sensei said, lifting a piece of chalk. Today we're learning about chakra. Kakashi pushed the door open and stepped inside the classroom, sighing heavily when he saw Naruto seated in a low wooden desk he assumed had been assigned to the child, swinging his legs moodily as he glowered at the floor. The Chunin instructor, Yuta Akemi, if Kakashi remembered correctly, was looking equally surly, and was marking a few papers rather more violently than absolutely necessary. Daddy. Of course, Naruto was the first one to notice him. Before either adult could speak, the 5-year-old pointed a damning finger at his teacher and said hotly, he wouldn't let me leave. I don't think he's even a real ninja. Hitaki-san, Akemi-sensei ground out, your son has been detained, and I have summoned you to speak about a very serious matter. Earlier today, your son threw a live kunai at me in the middle of my lecture. Children in my class are not to have live kunai, they have only just begun using the wooden mock-ups, and this blatant disrespect is concerning. Kakashi winced at the condemning tone. Gee, he stalled, looking at where Naruto was sulking, unrepentant, arms crossed and cheeks puffed out, mere seconds away from a full-scale tantrum. On the board off to the left of the front of the room, Kakashi spotted Naruto's childish katakana writing, repeating the line, I will not endanger myself or my classmates by throwing kunai, and I will not disrespect my teacher by trying to physically harm him out of turn, a fair few times. The Hitaki winced at the length of the sentence and wondered how many times Naruto had been made to write it out. No wonder he looked so mad. Akemi-sensei was looking impatient, so it was probably time to stop thinking and start talking. Naruto, he sighed, why did you throw a kunai at your teacher? You know better than to attack comrades. The blonde drew himself up indignantly, meeting his father's gaze defiantly as he spat, he's not a real ninja. He doesn't know what chakra is. He's a poster. Kakashi blinked. Of all the things he could have expected, that wasn't one of them. An imposter, he repeated carefully, glancing with mild suspicion at the other man. Children were often much more perceptive than adults, and Naruto never lied, so everything he said had weight. He honestly believed this man to be an imposter, and that was enough to put his father on guard. Naruto nodded, a stubborn pout on his face as he crossed his arms and lifted his chin. You should beat I am up, Daddy. He's not a real ninja. Not like you. Akemi-sensei was spluttering indignantly, and Kakashi began to have an inkling of what the problem was. Why do you think he's not a ninja, Naruto? He asked. Naruto scowled. He doesn't know chakra. He sigh. Chakra's energy, at ya need ta live and fight and stuff, but he's wrong. Chakra is An equal measure spiritual and physical energy that sustains us and is closely interwoven with our internal network, circulating our system like blood, which may be used to fuel different techniques and jutsu to aid in the fighting of an enemy. The child's tone turned sophisticated as he quoted his lesson book perfectly from memory with none of his usual bad grammar and pronunciation. Kakashi sighed again and ran his hand through his messy silver hair, looking at a shocked Chunin. Well, I think it's clear what's happened here. Naruto, I'll have you know that Akemi-sensei is a real Chunin and is not, in fact, an imposter. He is simply simplifying, so that the others in your class may follow, because they have not been taught what you have just yet. Remember, I told you that might happen. Akemi-sensei, no harm, no foul. Kakashi looked hopefully at the teacher, who crossed his arms and huffed. He still shouldn't be keeping live kunai with him, he argued. Kakashi shook his head. I'm sorry, sensei, but I will not take them from him. I promised him that he could have weapons if he came here alone, without me or one of my dogs to protect him. I'm sure you heard about the incident last year, when he was nearly abducted. Well, ever since then, he's felt vulnerable, without me near. If kunai keep his nightmares away and let him play with his friends without fear, I have no objection with letting him hold onto them. You will find he has only 5 kunai and 5 shuriken on him, and they are all blunted, and he will never throw them at anyone except one whom he perceives as a very real threat. Akemi-sensei still looked unhappy. He is perfectly safe here, he argued. He is watched especially carefully, exactly because of that occurrence last year. No harm will come to him. He doesn't need to be armed. Kakashi chuckled. Akemi-sensei, he said, raising his eyebrows, I know that. The problem is, he doesn't. The kid knows there are people who would seek to harm him out there, and feels vulnerable, rightly so, I must add. Don't take his perceived insurance away from him. For a long moment, Akemi-sensei stared at him, before he sighed heavily and stood, moving to the door. Wait here, he said tiredly, I'll go get the forms to move him up a grade. Naruto cheered loudly. Yay! Kiba's class. Awesome. Kakashi resisted the urge to bang his head on the table. Now the little bugger would think he'd be rewarded for throwing knives at teachers. Bloody hell. Parenting was hard work. Twin 1. Okay, now we get to the super special awesome special extra section. Okay, pay close attention. This chapter has been when Naruto was already 5, so like 5 in a few months or whatever. In this the super special awesome special extra section, we are going to travel back in time to Naruto's 5th birthday. This is complex stuff. We are no longer in fanfiction 101 feet, but I have faith in you. You can do it. Stay with me. This is not a flashback. This is an extra section, filling in a gap I left for you. Again, it begins a few days before Naruto's 5th birthday, when he was still 4, and ends on his 5th birthday. This is my penance. Enjoy. Special. AKA guilt-driven extra bit because I haven't updated in forever. Naruto's birthday. And some plot because I couldn't keep it out. Kakashi worked to unclench his fist and allow the scroll he'd caught there to fall into the appropriate place in his filing cabinet. He was angry, furious, vibrating. He had just come home from the 4th, and final, council meeting concerning the Kumo situation. In the 2.5 months since a Kumo squad had taken his son, Kakashi had been howling for vengeance. Preferably in the form of lots of screaming, blood and mayhem. The council, including the Hokage, was less convinced. They were maddeningly reluctant to declare war, despite the blatant disregard Kumo had shown to date for the peace contract standing between the two nations. Kakashi had been, perhaps foolishly, surprised to find the Hyuga clan head, Hiashi, openly and firmly on his side. Surprised because the stuffy Hyuga clan had never quite gotten over that whole "oh would you look at that Hitaki Sakumo started a war" fiasco. Foolish because the man had almost lost his own daughter 4 years previously in another botched attempt by Kumo to try and abduct a child of a famous clan. The whole affair had been kept remarkably quiet, probably because Hiyashi's twin brother had been executed as a result, to appease the Kumo government, but Sarutobi had felt it pertinent to inform Kakashi, just in case any of the Hyuga sought revenge against Naruto who had Kumo blood. Strife, politics made him sick to his stomach. The Hatake was grimly pleased to find a kindred spirit in Hiyashi. These attacks will continue, the Hyuga had argued. Unless we do something, Kumo will just grow bolder. We have no proof, insisted Kaharu, the old coot, as she shot a dirty look at Kakashi. Hatake-san has seen to that. Which was how he had ended up with no war and an official reprimand in his hand for unnecessary force. With a heavy sigh, Kakashi pushed his filing cabinet closed and willed his anger away. Carefully closing the study window he'd come in by, he trotted down the stairs with a cheery, "I'm home. Daddy." Something orange, blue, green, yellow, purple and red attached itself to Kakashi's leg. "Daddy, you're back. We were face painting. I'm a dog." Kakashi looked down at the jumble of colors haphazardly applied to Naruto's face. Truth be told, he looked less like a dog and more like a paint palette had barfed on him. He pulled up a painful grin. "How cool. Who's the artist? Did you do it yourself?" "Uh-huh," the 4-year-old said brightly. This time, Kakashi's smile was easier. "Figures," he chuckled. "Oh, there you are, kid," said a grown-up voice, Sume, who had agreed to babysit today. "Inuzuka-san," Kakashi said, bowing just slightly. "Thank you so much for watching my son. I'm sorry I was longer than I expected." Sume waved a hand. "Oh, don't worry about that," she said dismissively. "I know what the council's like. Anyway, it's good for the kids to play a bit. Your yard may be a bit painted, but your house missed the worst of it." Kakashi grimaced at the thought of what awaited him outside. "And oink. May have been face painted," Sume grinned. "It'll come off in the bath." Kakashi groaned. He made no move into the kitchen where he could hear Sume's 2 children arguing. Naruto detached himself from his father's leg to go join in. Kakashi would have reluctantly followed, but the woman standing before him caught his arm, halting his progress. "While I have you, kid," she said over casually, eyes glinting, "I was wonderin' what you had planned for Sunday." Kakashi was lost, which didn't happen all that often to the certified genius. "Sunday," he repeated dubiously, wondering if he'd missed a memo somewhere along the way. Everything male inside him started to whimper as Sume swelled up with maternal anger. Her hand shot out and whopped him around the ears. "Ow, what's today, Hatake?" She had transitioned from kid to Hatake, time to answer. "Friday, April 1st, the man replied. Sume waited, but as Kakashi just stared blankly at her, she sighed and said, "And Sunday will be April 3rd. Still no bells were going off, that date was just as unimportant as the last one. Sume hit him again, harder. "You son was born on the 3rd of April, idiot. He'll be 5 this weekend." Realization flooded Kakashi, and he instantly felt bad. Which probably had to do more with the way Sume was glaring and less with forgetting his son's fake birthday. "Oh," not the response Sume wanted, apparently, as she hit him again. "Idiot. Ow." Raising an arm to fend off more blows, Kakashi ducked his head and cried, "Well, what am I supposed to do?" That gave the woman pause. "Oh," she said, realizing who exactly she was scolding. Kakashi's own birthday parties had been pretty thin on the ground as a kid, and even now, because some things died hard. Under the circumstances, Sume thought it best to speak slowly and clearly. And simply. "You throw him a party," she enunciated. "You make a fuss. You give him gifts. You forget your OCD aversion to unhealthy food for a morning. Get it, genius?" Kakashi grimaced. Parties, gifts and fusses had never been his forte. Can't I just pat him on the head and tell him he's 5 now over breakfast? It was what he'd done last year, around April 14th, because he'd forgotten last year too, he ducked another swat. "No. Arg," Kid, you're useless. Okay. New plan. You, the brat, at my house, 10 o'clock Sunday morning. On time. Evil glare. Kakashi considered protesting that he wasn't late that often, and had she ever tried getting Naruto fed, clean and dressed by a deadline before, but his ears were still ringing with the force of the last blow she'd landed, and he decided that silence was the better course of valor. Yes, Inuzuka-san. And, you start telling your brat that he'll be 5 soon, Waihar. Yes, Inuzuka-san. And wash oink. That toy's disgusting, paint and jam all over him. Yes, Inuzuka-san. Soom gave him a toothy grin. Brats. Kiba. Hana. She hollered. Let's go. A little boy with a face just as colorful as Naruto's trotted out of the kitchen, flashing Kakashi a cheeky grin. An older girl, just barely still preteen, followed him with streaks of paint in her hair, no doubt put there by little male hands. Goodbye, Hitaki-san, she said politely as she passed, following her family out the door. There was a silence when they'd left, leaving Kakashi to raise a hand to rub his aching head. Ma, what just happened? A squeal from the kitchen, followed by an ominous crunching noise and, uh-oh, made Kakashi jerk and stumble towards the room his son was in, well aware that it was already far too late to stop or help the damage. 2 days later, Kakashi held Naruto's hand firmly and hurried along the road towards the Inuzuka compound at 9:49 in the morning, well aware that it would take at least 15 minutes to get there. So this is how Obito felt all the time, he thought absently, cringing at the thought of what Soom would do to him. It's my birthday, Naruto announced to anyone passing by. It's my birthday. It's my birthday. Daddy, it's my birthday. I know, Naruto, Kakashi replied. How old are you? There was a pause as Naruto thought about it, counting on his free hand as he was tugged at high speeds through the streets. 5. The boy eventually decided. That's right, Kakashi smiled, closing his eye for the briefest moment to do so. And we're going to visit Kiba-kun. Kiba, on my birthday. Naruto revisited the point. It's my birthday, Daddy. They reached the Inuzuka compound 2.5 minutes late, but thankfully Soom was not the timekeeper Kakashi had been in his youth, and she just gave him an approving nod and continued hanging the streamers she was attempting to fix to a tall light fixture. The compound's main courtyard was a grassy place that was ringed with buildings, each of which had a tiled patio making a wide border for the scraggly lawn. It was nowhere near as refined as the Uchiha compound or as elegant as the Hyuga compound, and had the air of chaos in it. Dogs were scattered around, the evidence of their presence documented in many holes dug into the ground. Kakashi liked the place immediately. Today it was strung with streamers and ribbons and bunches of balloons. A long table was set up on one section of the tiled area, already laden with food. Hana, Soom's daughter, was calmly pouring crisps into a bowl, handing 1 or 2 off to the straining hands of her younger brother. Other bowls held sweets and cakes of all description. Kakashi felt slightly bad that Soom had done all this and he hadn't helped at all, but the feeling was almost completely drowned out by relief at the same. He let Naruto's hand go and the blonde took off, announcing to Kiba and Hana and anyone else who would listen that it was his birthday and he was 5 and it was his birthday and he had no lessons today and it was his birthday and did they want to play and it was his birthday. Good job, kid, Soom said approvingly. You got him worked up. Well done. Now, she clapped her hands together. I invited a bunch o' people, they'll be turning up around 10:30. Then we'll have cake, and the kids can go wild. Play games and stuff. I have a few ideas, but they'll make their own fun. There's not many kids your brat's age, by the way, but I did my best. Thank you, Inuzuka-san, for doing all of this, Kakashi said softly. I would never be able to do it, and it means a lot to Naruto. Soom grinned at him. Don't you worry, kid. We'll train you up right. You'll learn how to throw a right shindig. Good thing too, because kids to have a lot of birthdays. And if you have any more, you're gonna have to throw 2 or more a year. Kakashi grimaced. He seriously doubted he'd be having any more children. People soon began to arrive, as promised. It seemed that, in the absence of children Naruto's supposed age, Sume had turned to her own peers with children, friends of Kiba. More or less the same people who had come to that horrifying baby shower several years ago, the Hitaki realized with a wince. Shuza, Inoichi and Shikaku arrived first in a group, without spouses and with children in tow. Kakashi was amused to see that the kids looked like literal clones of their fathers, and more so when he noticed Yamanaka-san's child was, in fact, a pretty little girl. He greeted them politely, receiving a variety of adult-to-kid responses despite the fact that he was almost 22. Shuza departed to hover over the food table. Shikaku pulled his son out of an outdoor lounge and shoved him in the direction of the other kids before taking it himself and leaning back, gazing up at the sky. Inoichi was being dragged around by the hand, his busy little daughter taking him from place to place and chattering. Sarutobi appeared next, smiling faintly at Kakashi and then Naruto and pushing his grandson into the group ahead of him. "I can't stay, I'm afraid," he said apologetically, laying a brightly wrapped present on the table next to the food. "I just thought I'd drop off Konohamaru. He's 3. His mother will come to pick him up." Kakashi called Naruto over to introduce the two, and Naruto was delighted to meet someone who was younger and smaller than him. He quickly ran to fetch Kiba, and dragged the bigger boy back to point at Konohamaru and declare, "See? I'm not little. He's little." Kiba laughed at him. Next to arrive was another friend of Sume's and his offspring, though Naruto had at least met this one. Aburame Shibi slipped into the courtyard silently, nodded once at Sume, completely bypassed Kakashi and settled into a corner. His son Shino wandered aimlessly for a while before he was noticed and absorbed into the group. Quite a crowd was gathering. Kakashi did a quick head count and came away with 8 children. He winced inwardly, not coping well with the social setting. "Is anyone else coming?" he asked Sume, almost unaware of how strained his voice was. The wild woman shrugged. "Dunno," she said. "Don't think so. I invited everyone I could think of, but I don't reckon the Uchiha will come. They don't like you too much, and they're not fond of me neither, so," she shrugged carelessly. Kakashi felt a jolt to realize that she had invited Obito's relatives, with whom he was not on good terms, Hitaki Kakashi as a thief and a liar, and we demand that he be blinded, and breathed a sigh of relief when he discovered they would not be coming. Still, there was a surprise on the way, for he had barely sighed when another guest arrived, 1 adult and 3 smaller figures, all dressed in pressed cream muslin. Hyuga Hiyashi walked calmly into their midst, holding his 2-year-old daughter in his arms and leading his 6 or 7-year-old girl by the hand. A boy not much older followed a few paces behind, eyes down, and Kakashi realized that this must be Hiyashi's nephew. "Hyuga-san," he said. Hiyashi met his eye for a long moment before he released his elder child's hand and placed the younger on the ground. "I apologize for our slight lateness," he said. It was 10:40. "Have you met my children? This is my daughter, Hinata, and her sister, Hanabi." He indicated each child in turn, before drawing the boy closer with a gesture. "My brother's son, Neji," he added. "Wow," Sume commented. "I didn't think you were comin', Hyuga." Hiyashi raised an elegant eyebrow at her. "You invited us, did you not?" "Well, yeah, but I didn't think you'd actually come," the Inuzuka argued. "You never have before. I have never been invited to the birthday celebration of the son of Hitaki Kakashi before, either," Hiyashi replied dourly with the slightest of smirks. He'd clearly been invited to Kiba's and maybe even Hana's birthdays before, and so his statement was an insult. Sume, far from offended, just snorted. "Away with ya," she scoffed. "Come on, eat some junk food like a normal person. Send your kids into the fray." With a word, Hiyashi did just that, sending his children to wish Naruto a happy birthday and make the lad's acquaintance. Kakashi kept Hiyashi's eyes for a long moment. "I didn't expect you," he finally admitted, and it was true. He'd had no idea of the guest list, but even if he had, he'd never have expected Hiashi to show up. The Hyuga gave a sort of high-bred shrug via the tilting of his head to one side. Fate deals us many twists and turns that we do not expect, he replied simply. Though, I do have a favor to ask. Kakashi was instantly on guard. Yes, he said cautiously. Hiashi almost smiled blithely at him. As it was decided that the men you killed nearly 3 months ago, those that attempted to